watch and listen to a very special presentation, musical presentation, from the late great performer, David Raphael Ben-Ami, known as Feinshel. He's got a fascinating background story. He was nifter on Hoshana Rabbah, I was told, from COVID. And we want to thank Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg and Gal Einai for sharing this absolutely beautiful video with us. Okay, hi, we're back. Hi, beautiful. The video comes a little disjointed when you're watching, I guess, with share screen, but I really recommend everyone looking for it on YouTube. Rachel Ferenczi gave us, sent us, clued us in about his music, and for anybody, I would imagine all the Israelis who have joined us know who David Raphael Ben-Ami was. There's some other YouTube videos of performances he gave, and sweet singer in Israel. That's all I can say. Beautiful, beautiful music, beautiful voice. We'll go on to our next guest, who is my dear friend and Shelimus HaAretz sister, Yehudit Tayar. She lives in the windswept hills of the Binyamin region in Beit Horon, which is between Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv. Yehudit is a veteran spokesman for the settlement movement in Judea and Samaria, and she is also a leading EMT first responder. So on a visit to Israel 2 summers ago, Yehudit took out time from her busy schedule to drive me down, or shall I say up, to Hebron, so that I could daven at Maras HaMachpelah. The road along Derech Hebron passes by areas A and B that were designated by the Oslo Accords for the Arabs only. And you see by the roadside, we'll see dilapidated shanties and impoverished looking people. But when you look beyond that, not too far in the near distance, in every Arab village and town that we pass by, there are scores of beautiful, modern-looking apartment buildings. Somehow the media didn't see that. But let me tell you about a key difference that I noticed between where the Arabs live and the yeshuvim that are also Area C along the way, one of which Yehudit and I stopped by to visit. By the Arabs, there are no signs of trees or gardens or greenery. There's no sign of the plant world's magnificent color. I can tell you as a flower essence practitioner, Bach Flower Remedies, that the desert is naturally filled with some of the most beautifully striking plants, colorful, striking. This unfortunate difference is perhaps a general reflection of what happens when minds and hearts are raised barren of goodwill and friendship. Nature's beauty and its healing qualities are given no thought, nor can they find a place to grow. This came to mind recently when I began rereading Sarah Shapiro's essays in her 2006 publication, Wish I Were Here, Finding My Way Through the Promised Land. She writes about her experiences living through the terror, and to quote, the terrifying years of suicide bombings in the first Intifada, and trying to reconcile long-cherished personal philosophies inherent to the Jewish soul and psyche that harbored a degree of compassion for the suffering of one's adversaries. These, however, she writes, fell away when fury entered her bones over the astounding cruelty of the Palestinian crowd that tortured, lynched, and dismembered the 2 IDF reservists who took a wrong turn into Ramallah in 2000, right on the heels of then Prime Minister Ehud Barak's offer to cede 98% of Yesha to the Palestinian Authority, a story which, unfortunately, has been back in the news because Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, father of war, has recently, in the last week or so, gave thousands of dollars to the murderers' families to buy a home. Yehudit, you are a leader in Yesha and an emergency first responder. Share with us your experiences over the past month and tell us what you would like to see change. Welcome, Yehudit. So you have the mic, Yehudit. We're ready to hear you.
Okay, first of all, todah that you're all with us, and we know that the strength of our nature, of our people, is to be together and to have unity. And we have seen many, many difficult situations, painful situations, not only now, but throughout all of our history. But when we, the Jewish people, are together, we see the strength of Hashem with us. This has been a very challenging time, and I'm not going to go into politics. We don't do that, right, Tamar? But no, we're simple people. But we're on high alert 24/7, and there's been so many attempted infiltrations. There's so many attempts to not only murder us physically, but to try and eliminate us verbally inside of Israel and all over the world. But we see, aside from the difficulties, we see the miracles. And as you know, just take the areas that we live in, the heartland of Israel, where it was empty. There was nothing here. No vegetation, no nothing. And we see, thank God, Baruch Hashem, time after time, more and more families moving in. And please God, we should have, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, every morning before I pray and I put in tzedakah, I speak to Hashem, which you do many times during the day. Please Hashem, show our nation and the world there is a Lord of Israel. Bring true leadership, righteous judges, and advisors that protect your name, our Torah, our land, and our people. And please guide us to be the kind of shlichim, messengers you'd want us to be. And we see, Baruch Hashem, with all of the difficulties and all of the pain, and you know how many times I've been in terror, how many times I've seen and witnessed and lost people that I love and even been injured in the army. but we have faith. And I'll never forget in the first part of the Army, before I was in what's called Keva, after the advanced training, when we're standing at the kotel, before we get our rifle and our beret, what do we get? The Bible. Because you take a huge tree with huge roots, you cut those roots off, that tree's not going to continue. And the Bible and our history and our moreshet is our strength to continue. And thank God, Baruch Hashem, we have faith and determination, and we will not break.
Amen.
When are you coming?
Well, then they'll let me back in without a COVID shot. That's what I'm doing. I hope soon. So, Yehudit, tell us a little bit more closely about what was going on during the recent war conflict in Judea and Samaria, where you're located.
Well, there have been many attacks on the roads, infiltrations inside of our communities, attempted infiltrations by terrorists, many rocks, many Molotovs, many attempts to murder us. And as I said, we in security are in high alert, and also in emergency medicine, as you know, so that's also high alert. And I think the most painful part of it, and this is what our friend that spoke before me talked about, is I always called it the tishkoret instead of the tikshoret, because the media eliminates the truth. They refuse to speak about Jews being attacked. They talk about the poor Arabs. They talk about the occupation. There are certain, thank God, media's truth, but on the most part, Israel, they don't hear what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Very sad and frustrating. They would have this self-hate because they don't realize is that those who us hate them just as much. We have emunah and we have determination. We're to do the best we can to protect of our nation, and God, we should be successful.
And it's true that I know you've mentioned I don't know back, but I know you've mentioned to me that nothing is reported, like lots of in Judea and Samaria, and nobody heard. Of course, we heard about during, I don't know what that noise is, that going on during around Gaza, in Gaza, but at the same time, just to reemphasize for everyone that there was a lot happening at the same time in Judea and Samaria. And I'm curious to know, Yehudit, were you at all involved with helping people who live in the so-called central mixed cities, like in Lod and Ramleh? Because that's not too far, really, from where you're located. So what could you tell us about that and where things are holding now?
Well, first of all, I have been very, very over my head here in this region, in between security and rescue and also being a spokesperson. And my husband, God bless him, who we met in the Army in a combat unit, always says, and where were you last night with your brothers? Because the officers I'm with are like brothers, as you know. Mm-hmm. But I think that one of the most unbelievable situations is the fact that it's ignored the attacks from Gaza after the despicable, the unbelievable bigotry of us having to destroy our communities and evacuate our people and take our loved ones from their graves and rebury them. And Gaza is attacking us. Why? Nobody mentions it. Nobody mentions the fact that, wait a minute, why are they being attacked? They're not there. Why are they being attacked? They left. They destroyed everything there. And all of this, with the missiles, we had missiles also near us and in areas around us. And that's not something new, unfortunately. But we have to be very, very on alert here. And even on Shabbat and during Chagim and everything, we have to be alert. And what we learn in the units that we serve in, Baruch Hashem, in the Tzva David, in the army of David, is first you prevent and then you respond. And that's what we have to do. We have to be out there to prevent and to teach them that they cannot come in and destroy us, because we're here. The eternal nation is here to stay.
So that's right. That's very true. I mean, the Rabbi was looking at something earlier in the week, and the Rabbi was saying that, all the ikar, the main point to do is you rise early, you get up, you show them you're prepared to fight, and that they'll back off. And I think it's such a sad commentary that while all this has been going on, that there was a recent community, Aviatar, I'm not pronounce it, was dismantled. And it's really completely contrary to the Rebbe's position that, when you're attacked, one of the responses is you build. That's the best answers. And it's a shame that happened. Our next guest after you is going to be Jeff Cohen from Zehut. And that is presenting what I like to call the alternative two-state solution. But I think what's important is just that, it's there they were outside of Gaza. It seems to me that all the, everything they could have, the Israeli army could have, I'm not saying easy, I'm not a military expert, but all the pieces were in place to really go back in and take Gaza, and it would have been completely justified. And I know in the past when we've had Anita Tucker on, who is a spokesperson for Gush Katif, she always says that, the Arabs that they employed and that they knew in Gush Katif in Gaza were up in arms with the Jews leaving, that they were begging them to stay and not leave and to come back. And it's, Yehudit, it's just such a shame that, good people are suffering there. And nobody is really, there's been absolutely no benefit to ceding Gaza. And there certainly won't be any benefit to ceding other parts of, any part of Judea and Samaria or Yerushalayim. But give us a closing thought, Yehudit, and we're so happy you could make it, but any closing
Thank you. I'm waiting for us, Bezrat Hashem, to be literally together, and I'm here for any time that you want me. And I just want you to know that when we look around with all of the difficulties, with all of the pain, and I'm a family of victims of terror, and we have faith, and we have really the strength to go on because of that faith. And all of us together, no matter where we are, and that's what Hashem wants, is us to be together. And that is the strength for us to go on. The eternal nation is not afraid of a long way. And Baruch Hashem, we're together, Tamid, forever. And V'shavu banim legvulam. Toda.
Amen. Thank you, Yehudit. Good to see you.
Bye, darling.
Bye. So during Pesach, we received a video appeal that left us reeling in disbelief and outrage, made on behalf of Boaz Shavo by his son Asael. The Jewish community was being asked to help his father pay off a recent court judgment made against him for damages to an Arab who had claimed he was injured when, 29 years earlier, Boaz had shot into the air in self-defense to ward off a crowd of Arabs who had stopped his car and were blocking him and threatening his life. In our research about the case, we were introduced to Yotam Eyal, who is the founder of the Legal Forum for Israel. The Legal Forum is a team.
Yeah, I'm not the founder. I'm just the CEO.
Oh, okay. Yotam, the Legal Forum for Israel has a group of over 370 attorneys, economists, and other professionals who are working to redress the imbalances that have risen between Israel's legislative, administrative, and judicial branches, and thereby to protect civil rights, ensure sound governance, and safeguard Israel's and the Jewish people's national interests. I am pleased to introduce him now as our next guest, who will speak about cases like Boaz Shavuot, the right to self-defense, and the egregiously wrong trial and conviction of Amiran Ben Uliel and Alicia Odess in the Duma case. Welcome, Yotam.
So, thank you very much for having me. I hear all the speakers that spoke about very, very important issues that coming in Israel taking a place. And in order to understand how it can happen that for example, HaAretz Kohanim, they have very hard time to buy houses in Yerushalayim. And in order to understand all the question about the legal issues of the Temple Mount, we have to go to the base where it's all getting into the point that the most important point that deciding where if it's gonna be easy to do it or not easy to do it. There is a big fight that going under the surface in Israel. And sometimes it's not so under the surface, but most of the time is going under the surface. It's the fight about the identity of Israel state as a Jewish state. Tamar opened when she spoke in the beginning about the young the kid in England, and she said that it has to be important that who is Jewish. And in Israel, where it's supposed to be the place of the Jewish people, we have a lot of powers that trying to go and take out the Jewish identity of the state. And these forces, for years, they didn't manage to do it in the politics. So what they did, they went under the surface and they understood that the most important place to fight and to appoint all the power in order to change will be the judiciary system in Israel. And this is why we are focusing mostly on the judiciary system in Israel, because in order to understand all the politics and all the question about the Jewish identity, about the Jewish land, about the Jewish Torah, about everything that's going in Israel, it's going all eventually coming to the judiciary system. I'm gonna give you one very good example for it. There is a law in Israel that states that only that some people can't appoint to the Knesset. Why they can't appoint? Who's these people? There is 3 conditions in order to go to appoint to the Knesset. First of all, every citizen have the right over 18 have the right to go to appoint to the Knesset. So there is 3 conditions that you can't go to the Knesset. The first of all is the one that says you have to recognize Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. But it's supposed to be very, very basic thing, but Israel have their own identity as a Jewish and democratic state, and this is why everyone have to accept it in order to run to the Knesset. The second one is even more it makes sense. It says you can't go to a point to the Knesset if you are supporting acts of violence, of terror against Israel. And the third says if you can't run to the Knesset if you are racist. Now, since this law was a bill proposal and passed in the Knesset as a law of Israel state, till today there was a lot of cases that came into the Supreme Court in order to prevent people from running to the Knesset. And in even one case, the Supreme Court didn't recognize the 2 first conditions. There is a party in Israel Knesset. Her name is Balad. Balad is Arab party that support terror in their agenda. The guy that established the party is the guy is convicted later and helping in Hezbollah to spying for Hezbollah against Israel. And there was another 4 different Knesset members in this party that was supporting terror. One was on the Marmara boat that came into Gaza, and she attacked Israeli soldiers. One was went into the jail and gave cell phones to prisoners in order them to call to other terrorists and help them to move things. And all of them convicted, but still the Supreme Court didn't apply this law on them, and says even that the Knesset says they're not allowed to appoint to the Knesset. The Supreme Court gave him the option to run to the Knesset. He overruled the decision of the Knesset and give him the option to run to the Knesset. And we saw later what happened. And the renowned agenda of this party and other Arab parties in Israel, they are not recognizing Israel as a Jewish state. So this is a good example for what happened when we're getting, even the law is good, when we're getting into the judiciary system, the Supreme Court or different courts are acting in order to prevent Israel as a Jewish state. Because what happened when you have MK members, but the Arab MK members, but doesn't recognize Israel as a Jewish state, for eventually, definitely they gonna go against every aspect of Jewish decision, of Jewish thing that you want to pass in the Knesset. Today, there is a basic law, I'm sure you all heard about it. It's a basic law, the Jewish nation state law. This law came to today is after it passed in the Knesset, and it became a basic law that is supposed to be very high level of law in Israel, kind of constitution by the how the Supreme Court recognized it. So now we're standing in front of the Supreme Court. And what happened? But today in the Supreme Court in Israel, there is a lot of judges that doesn't recognize Israel as a Jewish state. They said these judges actually came from very, very left-wing organization, anti-Jewish organization, but in order to go into the most important place that we have today with the most power in Israel, it's the Supreme Court, and go and overruling laws of Israel's of the Knesset, but passing this law. So this is where it's all going into the point, but all the power getting to this point. And there is different parts of the judiciary system, but touching this stuff. So the cases that Tamar mentioned here, this is coming from the same point. Let's speak about the Shabo case. In the Shabo case, there was a terrorist. Boaz Shabo, he drove to his home in Itamar. When in the way, he got into an ambush of people that throwing rocks on him. Think about you getting into riding just on your way to home, and lots of rocks falling from all over, and let's say we know people that died from it. I mean, it's very, very dangerous thing. So what he did, he get out of his car and shot to the direction of the people that throwing rocks. And after a few months, someone said, "I got hurt from your shooting, because I wasn't involved in the throwing rocks on you. So now you need to pay me." He came to the court and says he need to pay me money because he just shot me and I wasn't part of it. But think about it. If a lot of people come and throwing rocks and someone stand in the area, he's not naive. He have most chances that he's a part of it. Even if he's not part of it, you're not supposed to go against the guy that defend himself. I mean, you use weapons in order to defend yourself in such critical situations. And the court, for years, these cases went into the court, and for years it moved. And in 2002, the court even says that the lawyer of the Arab that sue Boaz Shabo, is actually he forged a document because he have the sign on the document of his wife, but already murdered in different occasion. So there was it going all over, and eventually they went against the Supreme Court rule against Boaz Shabo. And why they coming into a point that they're ruling against someone that defend himself? And that's not the only case that this thing happened. I mean, every time that someone in Israel, Jewish in Israel, defend himself with a gun, he immediately is suspicious as someone that went against the law. And it's crazy because it's self-defense. The first thing need to say, this is self-defense. If the terrorists need to go and say differently and prove differently, no. But in Israel, because the Supreme Court and because of the courts and all the idea before it's not recognized in Israel as a Jewish state, and you don't recognize the right to defend yourself. This is why it's coming to the point that terror victim need to pay to some of the people that attack him money eventually. And that's a crazy case. Tamar says about the Amiram Uliel case. So I don't know what happened in Amiram Uliel case. You probably all remember the Duma case when there was a family in Duma village that got burned and died in the flames. And that was very, very sadly occasion. I mean, no one happy when someone died from a fire, and the Israeli forces, different forces, they went and find some guys, but they says you did it and put them on a trial. Now, I don't know if Amiram ben Uliel actually did it or not did it. What I know that in order to make a confession from him, he got tortured. And these things is something that we can't agree to happen. Think about someone, but you're putting him in jail, you prevent him from seeing a lawyer, and you're torturing him. You mean you're not giving him to sleep, you tied him to the chair, you tied him into a stand, he can't sit for a long hours, and then he confessed about it. And how this confessed can be actually true. And the court decided he said something after the lawyers of Amiram ben Uliel, they went to the court and said, this is not legal. I mean, you can't torture someone and take the confession and says, okay, this confession is actually true. So the court said, you're right. But we're gonna take the confession of the day after. I mean, because in this day it wasn't a torture. Think about someone that's sitting in this situation, but knows. But just yesterday he got tortured. So if he's not gonna confess, he's gonna torture again. Who cares if it took a day or a year? You know that this is what's gonna happen. So we can agree with this stuff, but in my point of view, and what we are doing in the legal forum for Israel, and all our lawyers is voluntarily acting in order to fix the judiciary system in Israel. Think of today we got a new government and we got a new prime minister. And when you think about prime minister, you say, okay, now we can do whatever he wants. And the reality in Israel that he can't do whatever he wants. He can't do anything without the acceptance of the government legal advisor, but he also head of a prosecution in Israel. That means, think about Netanyahu, that was prime minister till today. The government legal advisor, is on legal advisor, is the one that prosecuted him into criminal charges. So he has to get agreement for everything that he wants. And it's crazy because when we going to election, we have a majority of Jewish people in Israel. And we're going to election, we're giving our votes into the Jewish guy because we want him to save Israel as a Jewish state. And then it's coming to a person that we never elected. And this guy can tell him, you can't go to the court. You can't pass this law, and you can pass this decision. And when we got going to, so when someone appealed against the decision, so the government legal advisor told him, no, you can't even defend yourself in the Supreme Court, because I'm the one that's gonna stand there, even that I'm gonna argue against you, and you can't take another lawyer in order to support your claim. This is crazy. I know for some of you, this is going on the first surface. People doesn't know that this is the reality in Israel. And for some of you, it's gonna sound crazy that it's not democratic. It's not going by any way of thinking that makes sense. But this is the reality, and this is why this is the most important part that we are focusing in Israel in order to change. And we have some successes in the processes, and we are defending in Supreme Court, and we are helping. We're writing laws, bills. We're submitting bills in order to change the situation. And unfortunately, today we have a government, but I'm not sure we're gonna help us in this way. But this is where the other side, I spoke about the other side, have a lot of money, and he spend in a lot of organizations. There is, I think, around 300 or 400 left organizations, but working to change the reality in Israel. And we don't have this money, but we have the power of the people. We have people that believe in the way. I mean, 370 lawyers that believe in this way and taking their time voluntarily in order to change the situation. And we are not the only organization. So there is a very, very good vibes in order to change it. And there is and if you are believe, we know that today is the Rabbi passed, so Gimmel Tammuz. So it's all going to in the end to, if you are believe in your rights to stand here, if you are believe that this is our land, if you are believe that the Torah give us this place, and if you are believe you have the moral and you have the power to do everything in order to change it, and the history shows, and we know that if you are believe in your purpose, that means you're gonna win. And this is what we are doing. And so thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Thank you, Yotam, for joining us. Great work.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So we're going to introduce our next guest, Jeff Cohen. Jeff Cohen is the USA Director for Zehut International, and which is Moshe Feiglin's political movement and party in Israel. I am probably Moshe Feiglin's biggest fan for the two-state for his plan. Hold on a second, give me a second. And what I wanted to say is the Zehut plan is called the one-state solution for one people. And in our view, it is the peace plan, the only peace plan that follows both the spirit and the word of the Rebbe's directives for peace. This is the alternative to all of the different configurations of the two-state solution that keep coming up and are a plague to the Jewish people, including President Trump's well-intentioned, sincere, but completely misguided deal of the century. And I would say that even the Abraham Accords that are turning out to be a positive force for mutual benefit between regional neighbors still needlessly commits Israel to continue to achieve a just, comprehensive, realistic, and during negotiated solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that meets the legitimate needs and aspirations of both peoples, which really is code for establishing a Palestinian state in the land of Israel. So I'm going to ask Jeff again, we're so happy that he's back with us, to share with us what Zehut's peace plan has to offer. It's the only plan that I believe really gives the Arabs a fair chance at a good future. And what's being done since Moshe's party is not in the Knesset? What is being done to shift the script, as I like to say, so that there can be a change? And I do want to add that, and Jeff will, and I think this was Moshe's ideal as well, is that in a sense, it doesn't matter who's running the Israeli government. We want everyone to embrace this plan and implement it. So if it's the left, it's the right, it's the religious parties. Hey, Mansour Abbas, even you, this is the plan that will benefit everyone. And we believe, again, follows what the Rabbi was talking about and will bring real peace. So take it away, Jeff.
Thank you, Tamar. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Zehut, which means identity, is at the fundamental root of the problem of Israel, right? Israel has an identity problem. And you said something earlier that, a lot of people, when we talk about the Palestinian nation, we put it in air quotes or whatever it may be. And I'm going to tell you right now, there is a Palestinian nation, but it's not the one you're thinking of. And I'm going to show it to you right now. At least one example right now. This is a little bit about my identity as a Palestinian. This is my grandfather's passport, which was issued to him in Palestine in 1925. And as you can see on it, it says Pinchas Cohen, a Palestinian. And I'll have you know that only Jews had the word Palestinian on their passport. The Arabs who were living in the Mandate of Palestine at the time refused to have the word Palestinian put on their passports. And they had where they were originally from. Typically, it would say an Egyptian, Syrian, something to that effect. So here's a little bit about my identity. I am more of a Palestinian than any claim to be Arab Palestinian. So I'm going to start today with a little bit of a statement, which is Israel is at war, okay? And we have been at war since 1948. We've had a few patches here and there where we have not been actively fighting, but we're at war. And the question is, why are we at war? Right? Have you noticed that Israel is the only state in the world that does not know how to define its borders? No other country in the world cannot define its own borders. And why is that? Right? We can't define our borders because we still have not managed to define our identity, because we have not embraced our identity, our zehut, as Jews. And this is exactly why the Oslo Accords themselves were signed. The Oslo Accords were not about peace. They were about the Israelization of the state as opposed to the Judaization of the state. And what I'm going to share with you now is a video I've shared before. Some of you may have seen it. It is always worth seeing again. And I will share it with you right now.
Oslo. What did we want? Peace? Security? We got war. For more than 20 years, we've clung to the Oslo Accords hoping for what? The terror attacks haven't ended. The missiles continue to drop on our cities. The country has shrunk, and we even expelled Jews from their homes. And what did we get in exchange? Thousands of fatalities and wounded, 5 times more than in the period preceding Oslo. The Oslo process was supposed to save on security costs and foster prosperity. But in practice, it has cost over 1 trillion shekels. Hear that? 1 trillion. In January 2014, Dr. Ron Pundak, one of the architects of Oslo, admitted, peace is not the goal. It is the means of Israelization of Israeli society instead of its Judaization. Get it? We're not paying the horrific price of Oslo for peace or security, but to settle the internal battle over Israel's national identity, to make Israel a state of all its citizens, rather than a Jewish state. We of the Zehut Party are proud to say, not a country of all its citizens, but rather one country for one nation with one God. In other words, a Jewish state. We also demand an end to the occupation, but our solution is not flight from our identity and our land, but just the opposite. Faithfulness to our identity and loyalty to the land. What's our plan? First of all, let's put the facts on the table. 1. This is our land. The land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea is the land of Israel and not the land of Ishmael. This is the land of the Jewish nation, exclusively. Second, when we say that openly and proudly, international law recognizes it, and the Levy report already showed that. Third, time is on our side. Israeli demographics is winning. Within 15 years, there will be a Jewish majority of 80% between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. Fourth, most of the non-Jewish residents of this area would like to emigrate, and some of them have already done so. So Zehut proposes a multi-stage plan: nullification of the accords and restoration of the judicial status to its pre-Oslo state. Terrorists will be offered the option to withdraw without bloodshed, just as the PLO retreated from Lebanon in 1982. The IDF will reassert control over the entire area just as it did in Operation Defensive Shield, and the State of Israel will exercise full sovereignty over the entire country. No entity other than the IDF and the Israeli police will bear arms anywhere between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. And what about the non-Jewish residents? They will be able to choose between 3 options. We will help those residents who are interested to sell their property and to emigrate to wherever they wish. Those who stay and openly declare their loyalty to Israel will receive permanent resident status in the country of the Jewish people, just like residents of other Western countries. The few who wish to become loyal Israeli citizens and serve in the army, like the Druze community in Israel, for example, will be able to receive full citizenship following a lengthy and in-depth examination. As soon as we, as Jews, determine our identity and stop acting like conquerors in our own land, the world will follow suit, leave the conflict behind, and accept our legal sovereignty. Does anybody remember that the world opposed the establishment of Nahariya, which was outside the borders of the partition plan? Does anybody remember that the left opposed the establishment of Carmiel? Does anybody remember the staunch opposition to Israel's bombing of the Iraqi nuclear plant? And today the world only thanks us for it. The center of Israel will be open for settlement, construction, and economic development, and we won't bequeath the problem of territories and terror to future generations. Instead, Israel will be a sovereign, secure, and prosperous state. Zehut, liberty, purpose, and Jewish identity.
Bravo. Bravo.
That is the plan that we know and love. What I'm going to do now, and I'll talk a little bit more about the plan afterwards, is I'm going to tell you 2 stories about Jewish identity. One is actually about an Arab terrorist, Salah al-Tamari, if you've ever heard of him. Salah al-Tamari was arrested in the 80s. And he was imprisoned. He was one of the leaders in the PLO and other terrorist organizations. And he was essentially, for a long time that he was in prison, he was the leader of these Arab terrorists in prison. And he was ready to give up. He was broken. He was totally broken. Until one day, he's in prison and his Israeli guard is standing outside, brings him his meal, and he notices that the Israeli guard, the Jewish guard, is eating a sandwich. He's eating a pita, he's eating a falafel. And he says to the guard, he says, "What are you doing?" And the guard looks at him like, What are you talking about? And Salah al-Tamari, this terrorist, says to him, "It's Pesach. It's Pesach. What are you doing? You're eating bread on Pesach." And the Israeli guard says to Salah al-Tamari, "I have no connection to that." Right? He absolutely had no connection to his Jewish identity. And it was that moment that Salah al-Tamari was reborn. He realized that the Jews, the Israelis, had no connection to their Jewish identity. And that spurred him on, gave him new life in prison. And then when unfortunately he was released, and one of the terrorist releases, one of the prisoner releases later on, he became once again a big figure in the PLO. So there's a story for you that's, we don't want to hear. Right? We don't want to hear things like that. But let me tell you one more story. And this is a story that Moshe Feiglin told me. It's when he was in the Knesset. He was actually in the Knesset cafe. And he sat down with an Arab Knesset member, and he was having a discussion. And this Arab Knesset member says to him, well, tell me, what are the borders of Israel? Right? This is from one Knesset member to the other, from an Arab Knesset member to Moshe Feiglin. And Moshe pondered it for a second. He says, well, what do I say to this guy? And he said, after a second, he says, look, I'm just going to tell him the truth. And he says, the borders of Israel are from the Nile to the Euphrates. And this Arab Knesset member looks at him and says, you know what? You, I can deal with. All of these other Zionists, can't deal with them. But you tell me the truth, and you, I can deal with. It just goes to show you when we tell the truth about our identity, tell the truth about who we are, the world will respect us. Even our worst enemies will respect us. So, the only party and the only movement in Israel right now that presents a vision and a meaning for all of this, for our identity, is Zehut. And it's no coincidence that Zehut is the only party that clearly defines the borders of the state of Israel. Because only he who has an identity has borders. Now, I want to talk to you about one other thing before I finish up, and that is the Temple Mount. As Uzi Tzvi Greenberg said in one of his many, many poems, he said that the one who controls the mount controls all of Eretz Yisrael. Now, I will defer to Rabbi Greenberg, as he said earlier, whether you wish to go up onto the Temple Mount, talk to your Rav, get his opinion. My Rav has already given me his that I can go up on the Temple Mount. There are precautions to take. And if you want to know more about it, I encourage you to go to the Temple Institute website. Specifically, I went up on the Temple Mount with Rabbi Chaim Richmond of the Temple Institute. And there are, when we went up, the first thing that we experienced was the Israeli police, right? The Israeli police, they searched our pockets, right? They made me empty my pockets, empty my backpack, anything Jewish, right? If I had a sitter or anything, I was warned ahead of time not to bring anything. But if I had had a sitter or anything, even a little page of Tehillim, they would have taken it away from me. Why? Because they don't want you to pray on the Temple Mount. Jews cannot pray on the Temple Mount right now without consequences. The second thing we experienced once we got up onto the Temple Mount were Arab women mostly, screaming at us, right? The moment Jews came onto the Temple Mount, they were screaming at us, cursing at us, telling us to get out, whatever they were saying in Arabic. And, we went around on the Temple Mount and I even said Birkat Kohanim on the Temple Mount at Rabbi Richmond's prodding without anyone seeing us. But I want to go in and just tell you a quick story. And this is from the Gemara, right? This is from the Talmud in Makot. It's a very famous story. Most of you have probably heard it. And it's the story of Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yehoshua, and Rabbi Akiva, right? They go up on the Temple Mount, they go up to Yerushalayim, and I'll read you the words. Right, it says, again, it happened that Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yehoshua, and Rabbi Akiva went up to Jerusalem. When they reached Mount Scopus, they tore their garments. When they reached the Temple Mount, they saw a fox emerging from the place of the Holy of Holies. The others started weeping. Rabbi Akiva laughed. So they said to him, why are you laughing? And he said to them, he says, why are you weeping? And they said to him, a place so holy that it is said of it, the stranger that approaches it shall die. And now foxes traverse it, and we shouldn't weep. So he said to them, that is why I laugh. For it is written, I shall have bear witness for me, faithful witnesses, Uriah, the priest, and Zechariah. Now, what is the connection between Uriah and Zechariah, right? Uriah was in the time of the first temple, and Zechariah was in the time of the second temple. But the Torah makes Zechariah's prophecy dependent on Uriah's prophecy. So with Uriah, it is written, therefore, because of you, Zion shall be plowed as a field. Jerusalem shall become heaps, and the Temple Mount like the high places of a forest. With this Zechariah, it's written, old men and women shall yet sit in the streets of Jerusalem. So Rabbi Akiva says, as long as Uriah's prophecy had not been fulfilled, I feared that Zechariah's prophecy may not be fulfilled either. But now that Uriah's prophecy has been fulfilled, it is certain that Zechariah's prophecy will be fulfilled. With these words, they replied to him, Akiva, you have consoled us. You have consoled us. By the way, that story is actually recorded on the Chabad website. You can go read it for yourself. But why did I read that story to you? I read it to you because when we think about the Temple Mount, it was these four Rebbeim, it says in the Gemara, went to the Temple Mount after the destruction, right? They couldn't have seen a fox emerging from the Kadosh Kadoshim without actually having been on the Temple Mount. So even they went, they went up, as should we. And it's part of our identity, right? As I quoted before, Uzi C. Greenberg says, he who controls the Mount controls all of Israel. So only he who has identity knows where he leaves off and where his neighbors begin. And only he who knows how to identify the enemy is capable of defeating him. And when the enemy is defeated, the war ends. And when the war ends, peace can begin.
Very good. Thank you. Really excellent. Great way to finish the program. I am curious to know, how is Zehut, how are you and programs like this, how do we keep that peace plan in everyone's mind?
So right now, I spoke with Moshe Feiglin about this not too long ago. Zehut did not run in the last election, and for very good reason. The system's broken. I mean, we all know that, right? We've had 4 elections in less than 3 years. The system is broken, and Moshe and those members of Zehut understood that even if they were to get into the Knesset right now, there would be almost nothing that they could do. The message really needs to go out to people that the system is broken and that we need to fix it, right? We really need to replace it. But as long as we continue to go out and vote for the same people who brought us Oslo, the same people who, made their careers on Oslo, and even politicians like Bennett and Smotrich, they also want to give away the land. Bennett's plans calls for giving away 40% of Judea and Samaria. Smotrich is no different, right? We need to embrace our own identity, and this is the message that we have to get out. And that's Zehut's plan is really the only plan that can succeed, because it recognizes our identity, it recognizes the identity of our enemies, it recognizes the identity of those who may want to live among us or are not us.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's really true. Well, tell Moshe again, I think I'm his biggest fan. I'm talking and writing about it almost every chance I get, because it's just the plan that makes sense.
Right. Moshe right now has his own channel. It's called Israel Tomorrow.
Oh, I heard that. Yeah.
Israel Machar. And it's only in Hebrew currently. So if you are a Hebrew speaker, I encourage you to go look it up. And we are working to get a lot of that translated into English.
Mm-hmm.
so that it can go out to the English speakers in Israel and the English speakers around the world.
Sounds good. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And in keeping with the custom of the day, we'd like to suggest writing something called a Pidyon HaNefesh, which is an ancient Jewish custom of penning a note, asking tzaddikim on the day of their Yom Hilula, the day of their passing, to intercede on their behalf. The note can be placed by the Ohel with Rabbi Russ, in today's day and age, you can actually email in your Pidyon HaNefesh to the Rabbi, and one of the secretaries there by the Ohel will take it to the gravesite, the area there, and read it as per custom. So I was asked by someone, so what are we supposed to do? I said, okay, this is what we'll do. This is, for now, Baruch Hashem, we shared all this. And I'd like to say that in our Pidyon HaNefesh, we ask for the things that we need, that we'd like the Rebbe to intercede on for us, but as well as to include a heartfelt request that there be true peace upon the land of Israel, Shelimus HaAretz, along with the immediate revelation of Mashiach and the Geula Shelema. May Golan, you're going to get an award once we get a hold of you.
To all the wonderful, wonderful women of Chabad. First of all, I want to apologize for not being in the Zoom when we scheduled it. There was the swearing of the government, and we had to fight for what we believe in and our ideology. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, really, for giving me this award for what I do for Am Yisrael. I truly, truly believe that Hashem has put me here on a mission to fight for Eretz Yisrael Shlema, for Am Yisrael, for what's right, and I feel privileged to be in this position. The day of the Rabbi was very touching for me, means a lot to me. And even though I was very tired and came back very late, I didn't forget to light a candle for the Rabbi and ask him to keep on protecting us and Eretz Yisrael and the Jewish land. These are not easy days for everyone who believes the actual rights of Am Yisrael in the Promised Land, but it will make us stronger, Be'ezrat Hashem, and we will come back stronger than it. And I want to say thank you for your care, for your help, for what you do for Am Yisrael. Every prayer counts. And again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for choosing me to be someone who deserves your acknowledgement and recognition. Thank you very much. Am Yisrael Chai will continue to be strong. Fight for Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael is not afraid from a long way. Lo mefached miderech aruka, and we will win. Be'ezrat Hashem. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for joining us. We really had a nice crowd, and I would actually like to announce before we finish that we will be holding an event with Mai, and also I think during the 3 weeks, another Zoom event with Steve Rodan, who used to be one of he and his wife were correspondents for the Shelimus HaAretz talk show way back when. And we'll have some interesting things to do. But thank you, everyone. Thanks to our guest speakers. Thank you, Miriam Leah. So once again, thank you, everyone.